Kim, I'm going to go ahead and turn your video off just because with 26 people in here, thank you. The bandwidth can sometimes be a problem. But if you want to talk with it on, by all means, pop it on when you want to say something.
Okay, no problem. I understand.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see everybody's face. I'm just afraid that my puny old desktop RAM would start smoking if I was trying to, let 28 people stream video at the same time.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I teach as well, so I know it. I've got some students go, well, we'd like to have video, and I go, it's pretty distracting when I have 40 videos on, 40 different screens trying to look and lecture at the same time.
Yeah, it can get quite overwhelming. Let's see, where else should we go? Let's do announcements. All right, well, it's 4:01, so let's get started. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much. God, this is amazing. 34 participants. I've never had this many people show up, but then again, I've never taught 4 sections of this class at once. So this is definitely a record. I just wanted to walk through some of the basics. It looks like from the doodle poll that Monday and Wednesday are going to be the nights that work for the vast majority of people. I still want everybody to fill it out. I just sent out an email threatening to take 10 points off your homework if you don't fill it out. So please go read the announcements, find the link, and do the doodle poll. And if nothing else, just read the announcements, darn it. They're not there to look pretty. They've got information that's really helpful. Okay, so a couple things to point out. Let's see. The first thing I want to point out is here in the announcements that if you weren't aware of this, yes, Cecily, sorry.
Yes, sir. I was just, it's Cecily, that's correct. I was just, I know you were, I saw the announcements, but some of us have been experiencing some issues with them. Some days they're showing, some days they're not. They may show on the desktop, but not necessarily on the iPad if we're trying to access them there. So I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Well, thank you. I had no idea that was a problem. Wow, okay. Canvas is usually pretty darn friendly, for most mobile devices. I know it doesn't work really well on phones, and that could be the same problem with tablets. It's just not formatted for the smaller screens, and sometimes stuff gets kind of hidden and you have to scroll way off the screen to find it. But thank you for letting me know that. Hopefully everybody will see the announcements at some point. But let me just go through some of them while I have you guys here. This is being recorded. I will post the recording to our Google files. Because we have 4 sections, it will post automatically to section 1, but the rest of you, I don't think will have access to it without having like the direct link. So you can see here, by the way, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay,
Yes.
awesome. Okay, so in the Google folder, and then I'll show you where the link is if you haven't already found it in the announcements. Right here in the main folder are 3 documents. This one is the current weekly meet sessions where I will paste the link to every recording after it happens. And it usually takes about an hour after we're done that it gets rendered and it gets posted, and they send me an email, and then I can take that link and I can paste the link here. But in the meantime, like if you're working ahead, like if you're already working on week 2 stuff, you can click on either the old version or the older version. What this means is this was last term and this was 2 terms ago. So I keep these for up to 2 terms. And then usually after 2 terms, the links are no longer good. They just, I guess Zoom just purges their data and it's gone. But so for instance, if you open up the older one or just the old one term ago, here's the video for the first week. And then if you were, like I said, if you were working ahead and you wanted to work on week 2 stuff, you could watch this video, and I take that group through a bunch of stuff on week 2 and answer homework questions and show them how to do stuff in SAS, and the same thing for week 3, week 4, and week 5. So if you ever want to work ahead, you can always open these links and watch those videos on the old version and or the older, right? I mean, they're going to be fairly similar from term to term because pretty much the same questions get asked almost every single time, but there are some differences. So, it's always helpful to look at both if you have the time. So that's going to be helpful if people want to work ahead. And I totally encourage you to work ahead. We all have hectic schedules. That's why it's really hard finding a time for us all to be here. So if coming down the pike, oh God, week 3 is going to be a hell week for me, well, then work ahead and get your week 3 stuff done early. And then when your boss is hounding you and you have no time during week 3, it's okay, you've already done that work. So you can always do stuff early. It's just doing stuff late that gets to be a problem. Okay, so in addition to those 3 things, probably the only other 2 important stuff is homework questions. If you click here, these are Word documents. You see they're .docx, so you can download them to your computer and then have an actual copy of all of the homework questions. So you don't have to go and buy the book, find the book, whatever, and get the questions out of the book. The questions are here for you. And so you can just download this, and then you can literally just put your answers, in this same document. And once you save it to your computer, you can edit it and do all that kind of stuff. So I have a copy of the homework questions, as you can see, for every single week. So you can always get them there, and you don't have to worry about, like I said, trying to get them out of the book. And then the other thing that's going to be very helpful, well, the data sets, of course. You can get the data sets from the modules. Every week they're always listed at the bottom of the module. But this zip file has all of the data sets for the entire term in one. So you could download that to your computer, and then you could just upload all of them to SAS Studio and be done with it. Never have to deal with it ever again. Or if you just wanted to find specific ones for a specific week or a project, then you could go into those folders and get it that way. So that's, somewhat helpful. And then the last thing, and nobody really usually cares about PowerPoints, but you can if you want, some extra study stuff, is the SAS stuff folder. Obviously, this first one shows you how to enroll in SAS, and I just edited this. You can see it was last modified January 2nd, 2021. The pictures were all out of date, so they didn't match the screens really. Now update this. I've updated the links. So if you haven't already enrolled in SAS, shame on you, you're already behind, but no, it's okay. But follow this. It couldn't get any easier. Just follow this, and it walks you through the whole process. And it can take some time, so definitely get on it as soon as possible. And what I mean by it takes some time is after you create your profile, they have to send you an email with a link. And then when you click on that link, that's what allows you to come back here and log in. And sometimes that email comes quickly and sometimes not so quickly. And oftentimes it goes into your spam folder. So that's why I put here, be sure to check spam folders. In fact, I might make that bold and even bigger, because that happens a lot. So make sure and check those spam folders when you're waiting for that email to come back from SAS saying, yeah, you're all good to go. And also, as I say here in the instructions, make sure that you use your school email, right? So you got to use your Franklin email address. So again, make sure that you know how to get that somewhere, right? Like you know how to go get it on Outlook 365 or Web Outlook, or if you have it, on your regular Outlook on your phone, or if you have it forwarded to your Gmail or whatever, just make sure that you have a way of getting your school email. And then the other most important thing, a lot of these things you won't worry about so much, but this one, the how-to summary, is going to be your lifeline in this class because it's broken down by week and it has all of the menu instructions and code when needed to do all the things that we need to do in SAS. So it's basically just your kind of SAS how-to guide, as it's kind of called, and it'll help you every week with whatever code you need to do or whatever menus you need to do in order to do something. Like, so for instance, if you want to do a graph, here's the menus, and you click through these things. And if you want to make it look nicer, then here's some simple code and blah blah blah. So those are kind of the main things that are in the Google Drive, and those are all accessible right here, Google Drive Access, one of our announcements. If you click on that, there's the link to the Google Drive folder. And then, of course, this announcement here talks about that the university has had a bit of, I don't know, an identity crisis when it comes to technology. They used to be hard, fast. You had to do all of your statistical analyses in SAS, full stop. End of story, no exceptions. And that was the main reason why this course was created, because in addition to teaching some of the basic statistical analyses, this course was here to teach you how to use SAS. Well, I guess they've since decided to loosen up that restriction, and now they're letting students, graduate students, use other forms of technology. So you're no longer forced to use SAS. You're welcome to use R, which is a free open source thing. But now with SAS on demand, I don't know why anybody would do R, because SAS Studio is free as well. And it's easier to use than R. It's more powerful than R. And it's got far more documentation showing you how to use it than R. You can use SPSS, which is it kind of looks like SAS Studio as far as it's got a nice little GUI interface where there's all sorts of drop-down menus and you click here and click there. But SPSS is really kind of, SAS light. It doesn't do all the really advanced statistical analyses. Usually graduate schools only let SPSS fly for master's candidates. They kind of oftentimes force doctoral candidates to use SAS or R. And then in addition to those, the school is even allowing you guys to use Excel, your TI calculators, and other online things like StatCrunch or VasterStats. So you've got a plethora of technology to choose from. I am an absolute expert in everything up there except for R, and SPSS I'm a little shaky. So if you want to use StatCrunch, VasterStats, SAS, Excel, TI calculators, I'm well versed in all those. I can help you do all those. If you want to do stuff in R, can't help you at all. And if you want to do stuff in SPSS, I kind of remember it, but I no longer have it on my computer, so it's kind of hard for me to do it. Somebody asked, would we regret not learning SAS using Excel instead when it comes to Math 810? As far as I know, this rule is campus-wide. So 810 should also no longer require you to do things in SAS. Now, that being said, they did tell us instructors that we are not required to teach any other technology other than SAS. So I know other technologies. I know Excel, and so I'm perfectly fine showing people how to do things in Excel. But when you move on to 810, that instructor might not know Excel and might only know how to show you how to do things in SAS. So it could be a bit of a crapshoot, but as far as I know, you won't be required to use SAS in 810. My advice is SAS is pretty easy to learn, especially with this new SAS Studio. It's a lot of, it's menu driven and it's pretty easy. There's a crap ton of videos out there. There's a lot of documentation. It really doesn't take that much brain power to learn SAS. So I would really spend some time learning SAS, because SAS does all the advanced statistical analyses that Excel really doesn't do well. But what I would keep Excel for is the simple stuff. Excel is much better at organizing your data, cleaning your data, and even it's much better at graphical representations, right? If you want to do bar charts and pie charts and those types of things, those are usually easier and much prettier in Excel. And then also, let's not forget that you are all, in the workforce or going to be in the workforce, and most employers want their employees to have at least rudimentary, if not better than rudimentary Excel skills. So it's always a good thing to kind of bolster your Excel skills. And no employer is going to go, hey, do you know SAS? Unless you're, working for NSF or, some statistical analysis lab or something like that. So that would be my advice, is try to learn SAS the best you can. If things are really complicated, don't beat yourself up. Don't bang your head against the wall, over it. Just go ahead and, do it in Excel, or, ask me and I'll show you how to do it in SAS. But try to get at least vaguely familiar with it. I think it'll help you a lot in 810. And also, you never know who's going to be on your dissertation committee. You might have a stickler on your committee that's going to go, you need to do your analyses in SAS. Now, hopefully the other people on your committee will stick up for you and go, no, that's no longer the case, but you could get saddled with somebody that, is an old-fashioned person and wants you to do all of your analyses in SAS. So just keep that in mind, that especially for the doctoral level, you're expected, well, we used to have to learn a foreign language and a programming language classified. So that's why most of us older people know SAS, because you had to program it, and that was our language requirement to get our PhDs, is we had to learn how to program in SAS. Now it's all pretty much point and click. Okay, so any other questions so far on what we've discussed? Rachel, what do you mean by it's very small? Is my screen very small?
It's just really hard to read the, yeah, it's really small.
That's the hard part about Zoom. Do you have your Zoom maximized on your screen?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, about all I can do is do things like this.
It's just much.
And then you can, but the thing is I don't expect you to read my screen. I'll discuss, what's important, and if there's anything that you need to really read, then I'll zoom in for you.
I had a question. You had said when we made the SAS Studio account, to use our Franklin email.
Yep.
I had already made it using my work email.
Okay.
That's okay.
It should be
okay.
It should be fine.
I appreciate the new directions too, because I struggled for quite a while trying to figure out, follow along, I guess. And
yeah, the old ones
I eventually
were
got
not great.
there, but it did take a while for that email to come back to give me access. It took a couple hours, I think. So
yeah, it can. They say it takes up to 15 minutes, but 15 minutes is usually
maybe
the
it
fast
felt like
side.
an hour. Yeah.
No, it normally takes hours. I've had some people, it doesn't even show up to the next day. So
okay. Right.
Keep that in mind. Give yourself up to 24 hours. If you don't see it within 24 hours and you've checked spam over and over and over again, at that point you need to probably do the process all over again or contact their tech support. Okay, anything else? Okay, so just when you guys get a chance, make sure you read through the rest of the announcements. There's a lot of happy, important stuff in here. Some SAS help. The SAS help just basically has direct links to a lot of that SAS stuff and those kind of things. And then once I know when our meetings will be, I will post this one. You can see it's got some gaps waiting for me to tell you what days and times. But like I said, it looks like probably this time and then similar to this time. I think, let's see, what does it say? I've got the winners are, yeah, the same thing. 17 people have 7 o'clock on Wednesday and 18 people have 7:30. So I'll probably do the same thing, start at 7 and go until, 8 or even 8:30 if I have to. So those people who show up a half an hour late, still have time to ask questions and that kind of stuff. And so with that being said, with having 2 meet sessions a week, first and foremost, let me remind everybody that they are not mandatory at all. I know the syllabus or somewhere in the course says this first one is mandatory, and even that's not the case. I mean, it's supposed to be mandatory just because they want you to be sure that you are logged into SAS. That's the only reason why they try and make this one mandatory. But I put up the videos, and everybody can figure it out on their own time. So none of these meetings are mandatory, but they are extremely helpful. I always hear feedback from students that it really helped them a lot. So if you can make it, please do so. And if you can't make it, please watch the videos because it really does clear up a lot of stuff. The second piece of advice I will give you is please take advantage of my offer to review your work once before the due date. Okay, so it's not going to be send it in, review, send it back, send it in, review, send it back. I'm not going to play volleyball with your assignments. You're graduate students now. You should have this stuff down pretty well, but some of it can be a little tricky. So give it your best college effort, right? Work through everything, see what it's like, and come Wednesday or Thursday when you think you've got it all figured out, you email me a copy and I look it over and mark up any mistakes and give you some guidance on how to fix it and send it back to you. Or if everything looks good, I just give you your grade and you're done. You don't even have to submit it. And I do that for all of the homeworks and the 2 projects, the mini project and the final project at the end. Somewhere in the instructions, it also says that you're supposed to like send me your data ahead of time, but we'll talk about that as we get there. Okay, enough about that. Does anybody have any questions about how to get onto SAS, and more importantly, how to upload a file to SAS? Because remember, that's one of your first assignments is to upload a data file to SAS and take a screen capture of it to prove that you've done so. All right, so if just in case somebody is having trouble and they don't want to say so in front of everybody, it's really quite easy to upload files to SAS. All you have to do is highlight the folder where you want your file to go. And as soon as you've clicked on it, you can see that this emblem becomes dark. Now for me, I created little subfolders, which is really easy. If you see how there's a gray bar here. I'll make it a little bigger. So you can see that this folder is highlighted because it's got this gray bar around it. If you then right click on it, you can go to new and do a new folder, and it will create a new folder below it, and you give it a name. And I created one for data files, and I also created one for programs. The SAS user one is just there by default. And a lot of students just put all their stuff there, and that's totally fine. I like to keep my stuff more organized, so I put all my data files in one folder and all my programs in the other, and it just makes it easier for me to find what I'm looking for. You don't have to do that. You just upload it somewhere. So whenever you're ready to upload something, so for instance, if I want to put something in this folder, all I have to do is highlight it, and this little icon becomes dark, right? And then you click on it, and then you have to choose your file. So you click on here, and it's going to open up a browser window. And now you just have to go to wherever your data file is on your computer. And I'm trying to think where I might have one sitting around. About, do I have one sitting in 807? There we go. And so you just double click that, and it puts it there. And then you have to scroll down and hit upload. And when you hit upload, it'll upload it to that folder. I'm not going to do that because this is something I don't want there, and it's just extra junk. But you get the idea. It's pretty simple. And then, lo and behold, you'll have data files there. I scanned the assignments and didn't see where to upload the SAS upload. And which assignment can that be found? Okay, so if you go to assignments, you'll see that it's not there. Interesting. Is it in the gradebook still? Research article, final projects, unit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow. I wonder what happened. It disappeared. Okay. Well, c'est la vie. Let's see. Did they augment the scores? 300, 500, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. So the scores are changed. Okay. So you no longer have to do that. Great. So nice. You don't have to waste time doing that. So it looks like the assignments have been changed. That one's gone. It used to be worth 50 points, and it looks like they just kind of put the points out on other things so that it's still 1,000 points total. So yeah, don't worry about it. Disregard my whole speech about uploading it. Just make sure that you can do it, right? And if you have any problems, let me know. Because it really was kind of a silly assignment. All you had to do was take a screen capture of this, showing that, hey, I've got a data file here. So I can see why it was done away with. So thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions? Cecily.
Yes, sir. I know that you had mentioned, or I read, I apologize, that we would be assigned to different groups for our work. Do you have a date in which we should expect those group assignments?
I thought I put somewhere in one of my announcements that I don't do groups.
Oh, I apologize. I overread.
That's okay.
Overlooked that.
This course is built on the idea of groups, and they want you guys to be in groups. So much so that I think I can go to SpeedGrader and show you guys the rubric. And you can see that part of the grade for your homework is this completion of a peer evaluation rubric, where you're supposed to basically evaluate how well your group members worked with you on this assignment. Well, I've taught this course, going on 20 times, and nothing in the world frustrates graduate students more than their group. It just never works. you guys are all too busy. You guys have too much going on, and it's damn near impossible for 4 to 6 of you to find a time where you can all get together, right? So I've disbanded the whole idea of groups as far as mandating them. Now, if some of you want to create a group, I 100% encourage it and support it. I'm just not going to force you to evaluate your people, so like that part of the rubric I just ignore. You're not going to turn in peer evaluation forms. And so and I'm not going to assign people to groups. But I do encourage you guys to work collaboratively as much as possible on the homeworks. Bounce ideas off of each other and help each other with stuff. And since it's so hard to, be in a group, at the very least, you can go to the discussion boards each week. So you can see that there's a general course questions where that's where you're just like, hey, I can't figure out, where the such and such is, that kind of thing. And then this one, I should just pin this since we're now on week 1. Pin it to the top. So the Unit 1 Doctoral Dialogue, this is where you would post questions about the week 1 stuff. Hey, I'm working on the homework, and number 3 makes no sense to me. Anybody have any helpful hints on how I get started? Or I just finished number 6, and this is what I'm thinking. Does that sound right to everybody else? That kind of thing. And that's totally fine, right? What's not fine is here's the answer to number 5. Can somebody else give me the answer to number 6? That kind of thing. So you guys, I think, have been around enough to understand the difference between collaboration and cheating. Does that answer your question about groups?
It does. It helps and worries me at the same time. But thank you.
No, why does it worry you?
No, it helps because just as you said, I'm gathering from the fact that you said 4 p.m. that you're on the West Coast, and I know that my classmates are scattered.
Yes.
We're scattered among different time zones, and like you said, we all have different work patterns.
Yeah.
Those of us in healthcare are scattered even more so right now too.
Exactly.
So I'm happy about that. I'm, also concerned because I was looking a little bit for the moral support, but I'm going to build my own coalition.
Yes.
And go forth. So thank you.
Yeah, and you will find that the discussion boards are very supportive. You'll get a lot of moral support there. In the past, I've had students form up their own little study groups and even create their own Zoom meetings. So if any of you have, a Zoom license and you can create Zoom meetings, then I suggest you do so. If you don't, and your group wants to have a Zoom meeting and nobody in the group has the ability to create one, just let me know and I can create it and make one of you, the leader, and then I don't have to be there. So there's all sorts of options. Of course, you can always try other things like, Teams, and I think Facebook has some sort of, I don't know, group thing where you guys can all get together that way. Although I hate Facebook and all that it stands for, but whatever works for you guys, go for it. Okay, any other bookkeeping kind of questions? Okay, so I thought on Mondays, I would spend a little time actually doing a little mini lecture, get the week started off, make sure you guys understand the concepts. And then on Wednesdays would be more of, so if we have a group or even a partner, can we hand it? No, everybody has to hand in their own assignment. That's a great question. If you work together on assignments, that's fine, but everybody has to hand in their own separate assignment. Can you show how to upload data files to a graph, or is this something a video should show us as unable to grab my data file from the video I watched? A data file from a graph. What do you mean, Tiffany? You mean like you were watching a video and there was a graph in the video and you wanted to upload that as a data file?
So I was doing one of the ones where you create a histogram, and I was trying to do it on Excel, but my Excel was not like reading numbers properly. So I tried to do it in SAS. And then the video I was watching, maybe I was doing it wrong, but I was trying to use the Excel data files that you gave us to create the histogram on SAS, and it wouldn't let me pull the data file that I uploaded.
Okay, so once a data file is here, did you double click it?
Yes, but so I did not go from that way. It had me go to, I think, tasks and utilities, and then create histogram, and then pull it from there.
Yeah, no, so you have to first double click it. You have to first load your data.
Okay.
So let me show you that process. So I know it's kind of small, but I want you guys to be able to see everything. So do you remember what number the histogram is in the homework?
No, I'm ahead, so it was one of the
Like,
later ones, but
yeah,
any of the examples would be fine to show me.
I think it's like 310 or something like that, but let's just say we want to make a histogram out of this data. So I double click 310 and you can see over here it says, you know, example 310.xls. It's going to put the data in the import under the work library. So basically the data set name is going to be import and it's going to be in the work library. You can always click change and change that if you want, but there's no point doing that. But your data is still not ready. There's still one last step, and that is you have to click the little running man. You have to run it. So once you click this, it says running, and then you get this nice little window down here. And I always like to click on, you know, you can scroll through and see what you got. Let me move this up so I got more room. It tells you, okay, here's your data set, what kind of data it is, the observation, how many observations there were, how many variables there were, you know, blah, 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 all that junk. But I like to look at it visually. If you click on output data, you can now see what was uploaded. Okay, so I had a variable called state, which basically just, you know, gives you a number to represent each of the states, plus Washington, D.C., I would imagine, or Puerto Rico. I don't know what the 51st one is. And then years. And then I think these were, I don't know, tax rates or something, some sort of numbers for the 3 different years. So now if you wanted to do a histogram or a box plot or whatever you wanted to do, now you can do that because your stuff is loaded. So if you now click on task and utilities, and then tasks, and then graph, and let's say bar chart, you double click bar chart, you have to choose your data. So mine is import, right? So I hit OK there. And then you have to tell it what variable you want to work on. All right, so I'm going to work on, let's try this one. It's going to look terrible because this is the wrong kind of data, but let's see what we get. And then run it. Ta-da! There's my histogram. And of course, it looks crappy because it's the wrong kind of data for doing a histogram. So yeah, so that's and that goes for anything you want to do. The first thing you have to do is load a data set by double clicking on it, which pops it over into the main window, and then clicking the little running man, which then loads it into SAS, and now it's loaded and it's there. And as long as you know your window is open, that data is always ready. So for instance, I had double clicked on 3.1 earlier, but I hadn't clicked the running man. So now if I click the running man, it wants to put it in the same, because this is the same thing. And so you can cancel it and you can change it and call it import 2. And now run it. And now both of those sets of data are there. And if I look at this one, right, this has got these things and their expenditures. Ooh, and that's really good for the pie chart. So if we want to do our pie chart, we can double click on pie chart, and then we have to choose the right data, which in this case is import to, right? So you can either double click or click and do OK. The category is going to be the program. And here's what's cool. If you just run it like this, if you don't do anything, you just run it like this, look what you get. That doesn't seem right, because if you remember what our data was, we had all these different numbers for these 6 categories. So how come these 6 categories are coming out as equal amounts? Does anybody know? Well, it's because if you look at your data, we said run a pie chart on the program variable, and the program variable has 6 values. Each one shows up once. So in StatsMind, that's what each of these are. They have a frequency of 1. And that's why it's not doing what we want it to do. So instead of measuring by a frequency count, i.e. how many times each of these variables shows up in our data set, we can say, let's measure it by another variable, and then we can use that expenditure variable. And now if we run it, look what happens. Ta-da! They now have sizes that are proportional to the spending for each thing, right? Social Security, 852, this big pie, right? Medicare or medical, whatever this is, 821, a big pie. National debt, only 253, much smaller pie, and so on and so forth. So yes, you need that subcategory. Well, not so much a subcategory. You need to measure by a variable is what you need to do. Where can we find the data? Well, I discussed that in the beginning. If you go to our Google Drive folder, all of the data sets are here. If you go to the classroom, they are also in the modules. So for instance, you go to module 1 and unit 1 preparation, and it talks about what you're supposed to do, and it's got some videos that shows you how to do things and how to work in SAS. Great videos and stuff. So this you know, if you want to work in R, it shows you how to do it. If you want to do in Excel, it shows you how to do it. And then you go to the next page, and it's your unit 1 homework, and it talks about, you know, what we're supposed to do, and here's some more resources. You know, so these are some great things on how to use SAS. Again, some great videos that shows you how to do things, some videos to show you how to do it in R if you want to do it in R, a video to show you how to do it in Excel if you want to do it in Excel. Down here, it lists the actual questions that you're supposed to do from the book. And then at the bottom, there would be a data set for you to download. But this first week, you're not using any data. So that's why you're not seeing any data sets for this first week. However, if you go to next week, module 2, and go to unit 2 homework, you should see some data sets right here. I think, is that it? No, that just, huh. They used to have in the old classroom, they used to have all the files linked at the bottom. So maybe they don't have that anymore, which is a good thing that
No,
I put it.
if you click the number instead of the viewer.
Is that what it is?
Because I downloaded them already. Yeah, click that number 1. And it should give you like an.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Boy. Okay. Well, thank you. That's real obvious. Does it say somewhere in the instructions to click the number?
No, that took me a while too.
God, that's terrible. Okay. So yeah, so if you click any of the numbers, it'll take you to that data set. But honestly, guys, I really think, because then you have to save this, then you have to go and you have to upload it into SAS. It's really going to save you an awful lot of time if you just go to the datasets folder. Read this really quick if you want, but basically what you want to do is you want to download this zip file, unzip it to some place on your computer, and then it just has all the data files in one folder. and then you can go to SAS Studio and you can actually upload all of them at once by highlighting all of them and upload, and it just uploads them all. Saves you a lot of time. And then you'll have, you know, something that looks like mine, where you've just got all of these data files that are just waiting for you to use them. So that's why I would suggest. That's much better than than trying to find the magic handshake of clicking on the numbers. That's terrible. Wow, I'm so glad you figured that out, because I don't think I would have. Wow. Okay. So that's 2 ways of getting the data. Okay, any other questions on that kind of stuff? All right, so let's talk a little bit about week 1 and what we're supposed to learn in week 1, right? What's going on in week 1 is basically sampling techniques. So you can see what they want us to talk about in these funny little slides. Bunch of class stuff, which we've already discussed, right? SAS stuff, expectations. Then finally, definitions, right? So this first week is, it's very definition heavy. You know, like I said, there are no data sets. The questions are all getting you to make sure that you can identify the difference between a population and a sample, and the difference between a statistic and a parameter. Now, here's the bad thing. Anything can be a population, and really anything can be a sample. It's all based on your viewpoint. If you want to know something about all of the residents of Washington State, then all of the residents of Washington State becomes your population, because you're only concerned about learning something about them. However, if you want to know something about all residents of the United States, and you take data from all the residents of Washington, then that becomes a sample. It's a really shitty sample, but that becomes your sample. So you see how the same thing can be a population versus a sample. It just depends on what your frame of reference is, right? What you're trying to solve, right? Because we do statistics to answer questions. We want to know something about something. So if you only want to know something about Franklin students, then Franklin students is your population. If you want to know something about all college students, then Franklin students is just a sample. It's that simple, but sometimes when they present you with questions, they don't word them well enough for you to figure out if it's a population or not. But I think the homework questions are pretty good. You'll be able to figure it out. And then of course, statistic versus parameter, that's easy, right? A statistic is any kind of measurement, right? Any kind of calculation that we do on a sample, and a parameter is the same thing, but done on a population, right? So if you calculate a mean, a median, a mode, a frequency count, a standard deviation, you know, whatever it happens to be, if you're calculating that on data that is a sample, then what you get are statistics. But if you're calculating those things on data that is a population, then the answers you get are called parameters. And if you are presented with solutions, right? If you're presented with a mean or a standard deviation, right, or whatever, if you're presented with these numbers, you can always tell if it's a parameter, because parameters will always be listed as Greek letters. So anytime you see a Greek letter, that represents a measurement on the population. That represents a parameter. And then statistics have just normal alphanumeric stuff. So for instance, the mean of a population is represented by the Greek letter mu, which looks like a really fancy U. And the standard deviation of a population is represented by sigma, which, I don't know, kind of looks like a sideways D. And then of course, if it's a statistic, the mean is normally represented by X bar. So it's the letter X with a little horizontal bar above it. And if we're talking about the standard deviation of a sample, it's normally just represented by the little lowercase s, right? So anytime you see our normal alpha numerical things, those are going to be statistics. And when you see Greek letters, those are going to be parameters. As far as all of this vocabulary is concerned, you really don't have to get this far into the weeds. There is one homework question where you need to know the difference between an experimental unit and a measurement unit, and then factors and responses and treatments and all that kind of stuff. But I think once you start seeing that question, you'll see how these words fit better than just trying to read their definitions. Like, for the love of all that is holy, do not just like try and memorize these things. Nobody needs to memorize these vocabulary words. That's what Google's for. What you want to be able to do is just tell the difference between an experimental unit and a measurement unit when presented with a scenario. And it's pretty easy, right? The experimental unit is the thing on which measurements are being taken. So it could be a person, or it could be a house, or it could be a widget, right? Whatever you're going to observe and measure, that object is your experimental unit. And then the measurements that you make on it usually have measurement units, right? If you measure the length of something, it's going to be in inches or centimeters, for instance. That's your measurement unit, right? If you weigh something, it's going to be in pounds or kilograms. Those are measurement units. Okay, so it's that easy. Don't overthink it. Factors are simply just variables that are in your experiment that are set by the investigator. They're set by the researcher. Those are the things that are controllable. You control the factor as a researcher. And then the response variable, that's what's observed in the experiment, and it's not controlled. So factors and response are often what you think of as like independent and dependent variables. And if you've done any kind of linear regression, you know, where you have y equals mx plus b, and you think of x as being the input and y as being the output, right? So x is the independent variable and y is the dependent variable. Well, we normally only refer to them as independent and dependent variables when you're running an actual controlled experiment with a control group and placebos and all that kind of crap. If you're simply just running a less rigorous experiment, or even if you're just looking at data and you're trying to determine if one thing affects the other, then your input, your independent variable, you'll call factors. And then the dependent, the output, the thing that is going to change because of those factors, right? That's your response variable. And it makes sense, right? That you call it a response because you're looking for a response. Think about your response variable as being the score you get on a test. And the factors could be study time, prior knowledge, environment in which you took the test, right? Was it quiet? Was it noisy? Those kind of things. All of those things are going to have an effect, right? They're going to cause a difference in your test score. They're going to cause that to respond differently. So that's factors and response. Treatments are conditions that are usually constructed from the factors in order to kind of see whether or not they have an impact on the response. So if you want to see whether or not environment really impacts the test scores, then a treatment could be, and I'm sitting here doing air quotes like a moron, like you guys can see me when I say treatment. So a treatment would be, you could, you know, force some students to take it in a noisy room and then force other students to take it in a quiet room and then see if that has an impact, right? That's the treatment is, the conditions that are, you know, constructed or manipulated, right? That change from one group to the next. And then of course the control treatment would be the benchmark that you're measuring against. So it all depends on, which way you're going. If you're thinking a quiet room is better, then the noisy room becomes your benchmark. If you think a noisy room is worse, right, then the quiet room becomes your benchmark. It all depends on, again, your frame of reference. So the control can oftentimes be different things, but usually there's a more obvious answer for the control, right? And the control is usually kind of the accepted norm as before. Like, we all accept that quiet is better for taking a test. So that's going to become our control. And then we're going to see how much influence noise really has. And then that's going to be our treatment room, where we have a bunch of noise and that kind of stuff. So you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with that. But if not, any questions? All right, I'll take the chirping crickets as I can't think of the word, just telling me to go on. Anyways, so here's a nice example. 3 different fertilizers to try, 1 currently in use. You want to choose 10 fields, divide each field into 3 sections, and put 1 fertilizer into each section, right? So the population you're concerned with are going to be all of your fields. The sample are going to be just the 10 fields that you're using. The experimental unit are going to be the sections of each field, because that's what's getting each of the different, things. This is getting this treatment, this is getting that treatment, i.e. they're getting the different fertilizers. And the factors are those types of fertilizers. The treatments, which fertilizer is used on each part of each field. Control might be the fertilizer used now. So if you're trying to see if these other 2 fertilizers, if one of them works better than kind of the major brand that everybody uses now, kind of thing, that becomes your control. And then the response is just going to be the growth of the corn, right? How well they grow depending on the fertilizers. Now, can anybody think of some confounding variables? We haven't talked about what a confounding variable is, but
Weather. Insects,
yeah,
staff to actually work the farm.
right.
A pandemic.
Yes.
Wow.
Now remember, confounding variables are usually only of interest if they affect one experimental unit differently than the others, right? So weather normally wouldn't be a confounding variable, because if we had a drought or if it rained or whatever, it would be the same across all of the fields, unless of course your fields were spread, across multiple states. Then weather could definitely be a factor, because one state would be getting rain, the other one wouldn't. Same thing with pests, right? Now pests could be a pretty good confounding variable, because pests can be pretty localized, right? You could have pests infest one field and not the field next to it. So that could definitely be a confounding variable that would, skew your results. Labor force, you said, absolutely, right? Because unless you're having the exact same people work all 10 fields, then there's a variable right there that you have to deal with, because you could have one team of people that are just gung-ho and they're, they do their job great, and then you could have the lazy people that, just do the bare minimum somewhere else. So that's usually what a confounding variable is it's something that muddies the results. And as you can see, insects, right, was one of the ones you came up with. Very good. Differences of types of soil. We didn't think about that, but that makes sense. So again, it's anything that would give one experimental unit an edge or a detriment, right? Basically, they're no longer on an even playing field. You may have heard this before when they talk about, doing these types of experiments, controlling for all other things being equal, blah, 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 blah. So that's what they mean by trying to get rid of these confounding variables allows you to make all other things equal. You control for everything else to be equal so that if you do see a difference, you know that it has to be because of the fertilizer, because that's the only difference between each of those portions of the fields, right? Everything else is equal. They all have the same soil. They all get tended by the same people, right? They all have the same amount of sun, the same amount of water, right? Everything else is the same. The only difference is the fertilizer. And if you can control for everything and make sure that everything else is the same, then you get a really strong result, because now you know that if you see differences, it really has to be because of the fertilizers, because that's the only difference. Okay, sampling designs. There are random, cluster, stratified, systematic, and convenience. Cluster and stratified are very similar, and people get those mixed up all the time. Systematic is pretty easy. It's the idea, you know, like I'm going to choose every fifth number. That's systematic. Convenience is, well, I'm just going to go stand outside the student union and poll everybody who walks in and out for the first hour, right? That's convenience. Convenience samples suck. You know, they're horribly biased. Systematic ones aren't great. Cluster and stratified are a little bit better, and then of course random is the best. The best sample you can ever have is a random sample, and then of course the gold standard is the simple random sample. So samples should be representative of the population. And then examples of concerns would be the self-selection or the confounding variables. Self-selection is always a problem. So that's something that's often referred to as the volunteer response bias, right? If anytime you collect data via surveys, you immediately have biased data because certain people just refuse to respond to surveys, and those people are statistically different than other people. And so keep that in mind. That's basically all of the stats stuff that we wanted to cover this week. I'll give you a little head start because this will come up. Cluster versus stratified. I always like pictures. And there's some really good ones out here. This one's one of my favorites for showing the difference between cluster and stratified. Okay. So the difference between stratified and clustered. In both sampling techniques, you take your population or the thing that's going to be sampled and you break it up into groups. Now, in the form of stratifying, you break it up into what are called strata, and in the cluster one, you break it up into clusters. But let's not, be pedantic about this. They're just groups, damn it. They're just called different things because of the way they're grouped. But you can see that in both of these, they've taken the entire population, which is represented by the big black rectangle, and they've broken it up into 6 little mini groups in each case. Now, the difference between the two is when you do stratified sampling, you break up the groups based on the characteristics that you're investigating. So you can see that each one of these groups is all the same color, right? All the black ones are here, the blue ones, magenta, green, I don't know, burnt orange, brown, whatever, and red. So these represent different characteristics. Maybe it's 6 different voting preferences, like Democrat, Republican, Independent, Green Party, undecided, and some other one I can't think of, right? But so you would put all of the Democrats in one group, all the Republicans in the other group, right? All the Green Party in one group, and so on and so forth. Whereas cluster sampling, you group basically geographically, and then you can see each one of your groups is heterogeneous, right? These are homogeneous, meaning they're all the same. These are heterogeneous, meaning they're all different. So each one of these groups should have a relatively equal spread of everything. They should basically just look like a mini picture of the entire population. Now with stratified sampling, after you've broken them up into your strata, you then go back and you randomly choose a subset of objects from each of your strata. And those are the ones that are dark. So as you can see, they took 2 from here, 3 from here, 2 from here, 3 from here, 2 from here, 3 from here. So you don't have to take the same amount from each one. You do want to try and take similar amounts unless you're trying to, as it said in the slides, make sure that your sample mimics the population. So if the population was predominantly Democratic, right, you would want to take a larger sample from the Democratic strata. And if your population was predominantly Republican, then you would take a larger sample from the Republican strata, right? Because you want your sample to be fairly representative of the population. So that's what happens here, right? You break them up by their characteristics, so each group is homogeneous, and then you randomly sample from all of them. Over here, cluster sampling, you break them up into groups that are heterogeneous. You usually break them up kind of geographically, you know, like this is the northwest side, north side, and so on and so forth. And then what you do is you randomly choose a subset of those groups. So in this case, they randomly chose 2, and then you sample everything within those 2, and that becomes your sample. So that's the big difference between stratified and cluster. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. You know, there are times when one would be better to use than the other. We're not going to spend a lot of time worrying about that. Just be able to recognize the difference between the 2. Okay, questions on any of this?
Dr. McBride, can you hear me?
Yes, Seth.
I just had a quick question. I always like having like a physical copy of like everything. So having SAS on like a web-based server, how long will we have access to that so that I don't accidentally like lose my data or something I put in there?
From what I understand, it's pretty much lifetime. Even if I think after like 6 months or something, it might after like 6 months of inactivity, I think it deactivates your account, but you can always go back in and reactivate it. Like for instance, I first signed up for SAS on Demand like 2 years ago, the first time I taught this course, and this is the data I uploaded that first day. It's been here ever since.
Okay, that's great to know. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? Now, with that being said, I would always back everything up, right? I would always keep, you know, download your files and keep your data as an Excel file, because you can always re-upload it later in case something did happen and your account did get shut down and you couldn't get back into it. But I think they keep it pretty active for a fairly long time. I think I remember, God, people are just blowing up my phone. And I'm usually so unpopular. I don't understand what's going on. Oh, you know what? It's 5 o'clock. It's all these spam telemarketers trying to tell me I want a cruise or some other BS. Where was I? Completely spammed myself out of the conversation.
I'll
Oh,
make backups
yeah.
of everything.
Yeah, make backups of everything. And I think I remember a student telling me that they had a SAS On Demand account before, because they took the course a while ago or something. This was in another term ago, and that they were able to like reactivate it, and then everything was still there. So I'm pretty sure that even if you've been inactive for a while, you know, it's like anything else on the internet. Nothing goes away. Everything's there forever. So I'm sure you can get back to it somewhere down the road. Okay, the last thing I wanted to do was just touch really quick on the homework questions. Make sure that you guys are getting on those. The best use of Wednesday's class is going to be a Q&A session, right? So Mondays, I'm more than happy to do what I did tonight and kind of go through the basic topics of what we're supposed to be learning this week and answer any questions you might have on theory and stuff like that. If you've worked ahead and you actually have a specific question, I'll be more than happy to answer that as well. But on Wednesday, I would like to forego any lecturing at this point. By the time Wednesday rolls around, you should have, watched all those videos that I showed you were in the within the classroom, on all the stuff. You should have read the book, skimmed it or something, or done something. But I mean, you should be well enough versed in the theory that I don't need to lecture on the theory anymore. And now you're applying it to this week's homework questions. And Wednesday should become more of like a lab day where it's like, okay, let's go through your questions. What are you guys struggling with? And let's discuss it. And let's, show you how to do something in SAS. And let's talk about the theory behind this one and why this is a cluster sample or why this is a stratified sample and that kind of stuff. And really see where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So that's my plan going forward, that Mondays will be a little bit more on the lecture side and Wednesdays will be pretty much all Q&A. Now, it doesn't mean I won't answer questions on Monday, and it doesn't mean I won't lecture on Wednesday. If somebody says I'm still really struggling with the concept of blank, well, then I'll take 5 minutes and I'll explain it. But I'm not going to set aside a half an hour to go through an entire PowerPoint deck of slides, if that makes sense to everybody. So with that being said, for Wednesday, please get going on the homework. Attempt all of them, right? You want to try and work through as many of them as you can as possible between now and Wednesday. And then that way you can ask as many questions as possible on Wednesday, and I can help you with as much as possible. As far as the help is concerned, getting stuff to me, I used to say I'd give you till Friday at midnight, but with this many, I've got 58 students across 4 sections. I really think you guys need to get me your work no later than Thursday at midnight to give me, a snowball's chance in hell of getting it back to you. Because if 58 people are giving me stuff Friday night, there's no way I'm going to get it back to you with enough time for you to make changes. So let's try to get anything presented to me no later than Thursday at midnight. And I'll even give you Thursday midnight my time, Pacific time. So that way, when I wake up Friday morning, anything that is in my inbox by then, I will look at. Otherwise, if it comes in after that, it's late and I'm not going to look at it. Does that sound fair?
Yes.
Awesome. Is Wednesday conference time 7:30? Right now, it looks like, let me bring the doodle poll back up and refresh the bad boy, see if anybody else has done anything since I've been talking. Ooh, yeah, we're up to 36 people. Nice. Good job, people. Ooh, yeah, and 7 o'clock is now in the lead. So Wednesday at 7 has 23 votes and 7:30 has 22 votes. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start Wednesdays at 7, just like Mondays, but I'm fine going until 8:30, right? So it's basically, usually these are an hour long, but I will give us that extra half an hour for people that can't show up until 7:30, so they still have an hour. But if, we're done, we're done. Like, I'm not going to sit here for another 17 minutes with nothing to say. So I'm assuming that anybody, who clicked on 7:30, you can get there by 7:30 or a little bit after, right? So, by the time 7:45, 7:50 rolls around, if the conversation has died out, we've answered all the questions that we've needed to answer, and you haven't shown up yet, it's probably going to be closed by the time you get here, because I'm not going to just wait around for somebody to show up late to ask a question, because you can always go back and watch the video. So I would say let's plan on Wednesday at 7, unless things drastically change in the next 24 hours while people are filling this out. But that'll be it. We'll have a Monday and Wednesday at the same time, 7 o'clock. And as I'm looking at everybody, oh, there's literally one student so far that's filled it out who can't make Monday or Wednesday. They can only make Thursday at 8:30. So that one student will have to watch videos, unfortunately. But everybody else can make one or the other, and oftentimes both, as I'm scrolling down looking at all these green check marks. So I think that'll work out really well for everybody. Okie doke. Get going on the homework. Please pay close attention to the first question, 2-2. People get that one wrong almost always. So discuss that one on the discussion board and in your groups a lot, because that one's very tricky. 2-7 is pretty straightforward. 2-9 is pretty straightforward. Let's see. 2-11 is pretty straightforward. Where's the other one that's tricky? 2-13 gets tricky. So you want to discuss that one. 2-16 definitely gets tricky with figuring out what all the factors and everything are, and the blocks and the replications and all that. So make sure you discuss that. 2-22 is pretty straightforward. Sometimes there's a little confusion on that one. 2-23 is also usually pretty straightforward, as is 2-31. Yeah. So it's really just 16 gives people some pause. 13 definitely gives people some pause. And the first one, 2, gives people trouble. So make sure you're discussing those amongst your peers to help figure some things out. And if you still haven't figured it out, we'll talk more on them on Wednesday. Okay. Any last minute questions before we adjourn?
Yes, I have my hand raised. I was trying to find out the difference between this homework and the action items. Is it the same thing?
Action items? What action items are you discussing?
In module 1, from your module 1, it looks similar to the homework.
I think that is the same thing. Let's see. So module 1. So if you go to module 1, there's got the preparation page, and then the next page, here's where all those fancy, lovely videos are. And then the next page is unit 1 homework. And down here, it lists the numbers that you're supposed to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Precisely. Which ones are you doing?
Sorry?
These ones are all of that, because it looks like they're quite different. There are some that appear here.
No, these are the same exact numbers that are on my homework sheet. 2, 7, 9, 11, 13, 16, unless they've changed it on me. 2, 7, 9, 11, 13, and then 16, 22, 23, 31.
Okay.
16, 22, 23, 31. Yep, the exact same ones.
Okay.
So yeah, all I did is I just put them in a Word doc for you guys, and I put it in the Google Doc folder, so you don't have to, go to the book and type it all out yourself. You don't have to. I mean, if you want to just turn in a Word doc with all of your answers without the questions, that's fine too. But I find it as a student, it's a lot easier for me to wrap my head around things if I can actually sit there and look at the question and then write my answer, below it, type of thing. Which brings up another point, guys. Please make it obvious where your answers are, right? So if you're going to use my stuff and you're going to use the Word doc with all the verbiage from the questions, just put your answers in a different color or make them bold, or at least put a couple spaces in between the question and your stuff. Just make it obvious that this is your answer so I can find your answers. Kofi, you still have a question? Your hand's still up. No problem. I know it's kind of hard sometimes figuring out how this technology works. Oh, there, you cleared it. Good job. Let me check my other list, make sure there's no other hands raised. Everybody else seems to be good. Okay, going once, going twice, going 3 times. Any other questions? Nice. Okay. Thank you everybody for showing up. I appreciate you making the time, and I'm sure it will be beneficial if you can. And if you can't watch those recordings, I will see you all Wednesday.
Thank you, Dr. McBride.
My pleasure. Good night, everybody.